The cosmos itself trembled under the fury of gods and the roar of primordial beasts. What if the most epic battles were not just history, but legend? We are embarking on a quest through 30 extraordinary legends of mythical warfare, from the divine clashes of Olympus to the monster-filled sagas of the Far East. You will witness the foundational stories that shaped entire cultures and captivated humanity for thousands of years. We will see how a single war among giants could forge the very world we know, and why an ancient king's final stand remains one of history's greatest mysteries. What does the greatest mythical battle reveal about our own world? Long before humanity walked the earth, a conflict of cosmic proportions shattered the silence of the primordial age. This was the Titanomachy, a 10-year war that pitted the new generation of Olympian gods against their predecessors, the mighty Titans. The entire cosmos was the prize, a throne forged from chaos itself. On one side stood Cronus, the king of the Titans, who had seized power by overthrowing his own father. Fearing a prophecy that he too would be overthrown by his child, he devoured each of his offspring at birth. But his wife Rhea, in desperation, saved her youngest son. She hid the infant Zeus and tricked Cronus into swallowing a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes. That hidden child, raised in secret, would become the spark that ignited a divine revolution. When Zeus came of age, he forced his father to disgorge his siblings, freeing Poseidon, Hades, Hestia, Demeter, and Hera. Together, this new pantheon declared war on the old order. The battlegrounds stretched across the very fabric of existence. Mountains were shattered and seas boiled as the gods hurled mountains and lightning at the colossal titans. Yet for years the war remained a stalemate. The turning point came from the depths of the earth. Zeus journeyed to the underworld and freed 3 monstrous beings imprisoned by Cronus, the Cyclopes and the 100-handed Hecatoncheires. In gratitude, the Cyclopes forged the ultimate weapons, Zeus his thunderbolt, Poseidon his trident, and Hades his helmet of darkness. The Hecatoncheires, with their 100 arms each, became a devastating artillery, pelting the Titans with countless boulders. The final confrontation was a cataclysm. With their new allies and weapons, the Olympians unleashed their full fury. Zeus rained down lightning, Poseidon stirred the oceans into a frenzy, and Hades moved unseen. The Hecatoncheires blanketed the Titans in a storm of stone until their strength broke. Victorious, the Olympians punished the defeated Titans by casting them into the deepest, darkest pit of the underworld, a prison known as Tartarus, and placed the Hecatoncheires as their eternal guards. This was more than a simple change of leadership. It was the moment the world as we know it was forged. The victory of Zeus and his siblings established a new cosmic order, one of law and domain, setting a timeless precedent for the battles between old and new, chaos and order. Yet even after the Titans were imprisoned, the new order of Olympus was not secure. From the blood of the fallen sky god Uranus, a new and terrifying enemy was born, the giants. This was the Gigantomachy, a second war for divine supremacy that proved the gods' first victory had created its own dire consequences. These were not mere oversized men, they were grotesque beings of immense power, often depicted with serpents for legs, born from the earth itself to avenge their Titan forebears. Their leader, Alcyoneus, was immortal as long as he stood on his native soil, while the king Porphyrion was destined to challenge Zeus directly for the throne of heaven. Their assault was as audacious as it was terrifying. They began piling mountain upon mountain, Ossa upon Pelion, in a desperate attempt to scale the heavens and storm the home of the gods. The very foundations of the world shook as they climbed, their goal nothing less than the complete destruction of the Olympian order. For all their power, the gods faced a grim prophecy. They could not win this war alone. A mortal hero was fated to fight alongside them. That hero was Hercules, the son of Zeus, whose incredible strength and courage made him the key to divine victory. This was a profound moment. The destinies of gods and humanity became irrevocably intertwined. In the climactic battle, the gods fought with all their might, but it was Hercules who turned the tide. He faced Alcyoneus and, realizing the giant's source of power, wrestled him away from his homeland, stripping him of his immortality before delivering the final blow. Zeus and Porphyrion clashed in a duel of kings, a struggle of raw power and will that decided the fate of the cosmos. The Gigantomachy was more than a sequel, it was a necessary completion of the cosmic struggle. It showed that the new world, born from the Titanomachy, could only be secured with the help of mortals, forever linking our fate to the divine and setting the stage for the Age of Heroes. But the stage for these legendary battles was about to shift from the heavens to the world of mortals, where the line between myth and history begins to blur. The Trojan War stands as the quintessential clash, a 10-year siege where gods walked among men and heroes became legends. This was not merely a war between Greeks and Trojans, it was a cosmic drama set in motion by a single act of vanity. It all began with the judgment of Paris. The goddess of discord, Eris, tossed a golden apple inscribed, "For the fairest," into a divine wedding. Three powerful goddesses, Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, each claimed the prize. They tasked the Trojan prince Paris, a mortal known for his beauty, to be the judge. Each goddess offered a bribe. Hera promised power and kingdoms, Athena offered wisdom and skill in battle, but Aphrodite promised him the love of the most beautiful woman in the world. Paris chose Aphrodite, and his reward was Helen, the wife of the Greek king Menelaus. Her abduction, or perhaps her elopement, became the spark that launched 1,000 ships from across Greece to lay siege to the mighty city of Troy. For a decade, the war raged not just with human armies, but with gods and goddesses actively choosing sides, manipulating events, and even joining the fray on the battlefield. This divine meddling set the stage for epic, heartbreaking duels. The great Greek warrior Achilles, nearly invincible yet fatally flawed by his pride, clashed with the noble Trojan prince Hector, a defender fighting for his home and family. Their final confrontation outside the walls of Troy is one of the most poignant moments in all of legend, yet the most famous stratagem was still to come. After years of stalemate, the cunning Greek king Odysseus devised a plan of brilliant deception. The Greeks built a colossal wooden horse, an offering to the goddess Athena, and pretended to sail away. The Trojans, believing the war was over, pulled the mysterious gift inside their impregnable walls. That night, Greek soldiers hidden within the horse's hollow belly emerged and opened the city gates for their returning army. Troy was sacked and burned, its fate sealed by a trick. This legend is so powerful, so deeply embedded in our collective memory, that for centuries scholars have questioned if a real city and a real conflict lie buried beneath the epic poetry. The story of the Trojan War forces us to wonder where myth ends and history begins, a timeless echo of love, honor, and the devastating cost of war. While the heroes of Troy fought for glory and a single city, another ancient conflict explored the very soul of warfare itself. In the sprawling plains of Kurukshetra in ancient India, two great families of cousins faced each other for the throne of Hastinapura. This was the Kurukshetra War, the heart of the epic Mahabharata, a narrative so vast it dwarfs most other legends. On one side stood the 5 righteous Pandava brothers, and on the other their 100 cousins, the Kauravas, led by the ambitious Duryodhana. This was no simple skirmish, it was a cataclysm that drew in millions of warriors with entire kingdoms choosing sides. The air thrummed with the roll of countless chariots and the terrifying presence of divine weapons capable of unleashing cosmic fire. Yet for all its immense scale, the war's most enduring moment was one of profound stillness and doubt. As the two armies stood ready, the great Pandava archer Arjuna asked his charioteer to drive him into the no-man's land between the forces. There, he looked across at his teachers, his elders, and his own kin, and his spirit faltered. He dropped his legendary bow, Gandiva, refusing to fight a war that would require him to slaughter his own family. This moment of crisis became the birthplace of one of the world's most sacred texts. Arjuna's charioteer was none other than Lord Krishna, a divine incarnation. Instead of urging him to fight, Krishna began a timeless discourse on the nature of duty, righteousness, and the soul. This conversation, sung on the battlefield, is the Bhagavad Gita. It explores the concept of dharma, one's sacred duty, and argues for selfless action without attachment to the fruits of one's labor. Krishna counseled Arjuna that it was his duty as a warrior to fight for justice, to uphold cosmic order against the chaos of greed and ambition, and to do so without hatred or personal desire. The ensuing 18-day war was a brutal symphony of strategy, honor, and heartbreaking loss where nearly every warrior perished. But the true victory was not merely the Pandavas' eventual triumph. It was the spiritual awakening forged in the heat of battle, a timeless lesson that the greatest conflicts are often fought within the human heart. Across the subcontinent from the field of Kurukshetra, another legendary war was ignited not by a throne, but by a profound act of love and loyalty. The Ramayana's epic battle was set in motion when the demon king Ravana, a being of immense power and 10 heads, committed an unforgivable transgression. Using a cunning deception, he kidnapped Sita, the beloved wife of the exiled Prince Rama. This was more than a personal tragedy. It was a cosmic challenge to the very principles of righteousness or dharma. Rama, an incarnation of the god Vishnu, embodied virtue, while Ravana represented the pinnacle of ego and desire despite his great knowledge and power. To rescue Sita, Rama forged an extraordinary alliance with the Vanara king Sugriva and his army of monkey warriors. The most devoted of these was Hanuman, a figure of incredible strength, wisdom, and the power of flight. It was Hanuman who first located Sita, held captive in Ravana's island fortress of Lanka, and it was he who set the stage for war by burning down parts of the city with his flaming tail. To reach the island, the Vanaras performed a feat of legendary engineering, building a massive bridge of stones across the ocean, a structure some say still lies beneath the waves today. The siege of Lanka was a spectacle of the fantastical, unlike any conventional war. The air thrummed with the flight of divine chariots, and warriors wielded celestial weapons that could summon fire, wind, and illusion. Ravana's demonic forces, the Rakshasas, could change their shape at will, creating a battlefield of constant surprise and terror. Yet for all the magic and chaos, the heart of the conflict remained a single, destined confrontation. The final duel pitted the noble Rama against the mighty Ravana. It was a battle that raged for days, a dazzling exchange of divine arrows and powerful sorcery. Ravana, with his 10 heads and 20 arms, seemed nearly invincible as each time one head was struck down, another would grow in its place. The turning point came when Rama, guided by divine counsel, unleashed the ultimate weapon, the Brahmastra, a single arrow charged with the power of the universe. It struck true, piercing Ravana's heart and ending his reign of terror. This victory was not just the rescue of a queen, it was the triumphant restoration of cosmic balance, a timeless testament to the power of devotion and the ultimate victory of good over evil. From the cosmic balance restored in the Ramayana, we journey to a prophecy of absolute and inevitable end. The Norse legends speak not of a battle won, but one that is fated, a final, terrible conflict called Ragnarök, the twilight of the gods. This is not a story of victory, but of destiny, where every action the gods take to prevent it only weaves the threads of their doom tighter. The first signs will be subtle, yet horrifying. A great winter called Fimbulwinter will descend, not for one season, but for 3 in a row, with no summer in between. The world will be locked in an endless, bitter cold. This deep freeze will shatter the bonds of kinship and society, as brothers turn against brothers in a desperate struggle for survival. Then the chains that bind the most monstrous beings will break. The great wolf Fenrir, a beast of prophecy foretold to kill Odin, will wrench himself free from his magical bonds. From the depths of the ocean, the monstrous world serpent Jörmungandr will rise, spewing venom that will poison the very sky and sea. The fire giants, led by the demon Surtur wielding a flaming sword brighter than the sun, will march from their fiery realm. Loki, the trickster god, will break free and sail a ship of nails steered by a crew of the dead to join the assault on the gods themselves. Hearing the call of the war god Heimdall's horn, the gods and their chosen slain warriors, the Einherjar, will make their final march from the golden halls of Valhalla. They will cross the Bifrost Bridge, which will shatter into pieces under their weight, and advance onto the field of Vigridr for the last battle. The battlefield will be a tapestry of predetermined duels. The All-Father Odin, in his golden armor, will face his destined nemesis, the wolf Fenrir. Despite his immense wisdom and power, the prophecy will be fulfilled as the great beast will open its jaws and consume him. Thor, the champion of mankind, will engage his ancient foe, the world serpent Jörmungandr. He will strike the monster dead with his mighty hammer Mjolnir, but will only manage to take 9 steps before succumbing to the serpent's deadly venom. All around them, gods and giants will fall, until the demon Surtur unleashes his final cataclysmic act, setting the entire world tree ablaze with his cosmic fire. The earth will sink into the boiling sea, and the stars will vanish from the sky. Yet even in this total destruction, there is a promise. From the waters, a new world will emerge, green and fertile. A handful of gods will survive, and 2 human beings will repopulate the earth, carrying forward the memory of all that was lost. Ragnarök is a legend that embraces the cycle of death and rebirth, a stark reminder that even for the divine, some endings are written in the stars. Far from the burning world of Ragnarök, the misty green hills of Ireland hold the memory of a different kind of end, the passing of one age into another. This is the story of the first battle of Mag Tuaid, a clash between the Fir Bolg, the original inhabitants of the island, and the godlike Tuatha Dé Danann. The Tuatha Dé Danann did not arrive in simple boats, but descended from the sky in great flying ships, wreathed in a magical mist that settled upon the land, announcing their otherworldly nature. They were a people of immense skill in magic and art, and they came with a single demand: they wanted half of Ireland for their own. What followed was not a chaotic raid, but a formal, almost ritualistic war, a concept as strange to us as the flying ships themselves. The 2 sides agreed to a set of rules for their conflict, a code of honor that dictated they would fight with equal numbers and use only specific, matched weapons. This was a battle fought with a chilling sense of ceremony, where the very act of war was structured to be fair. The fate of the entire island, however, would ultimately be decided not by the great armies, but by a single duel between their chosen champions. On one side stood Esreng, a mighty warrior of the Fir Bolg, a champion of the old world. Facing him was Nuada, the silver-armed king of the Tuatha Dé Danann, a leader renowned for his justice and skill. Their combat was a furious, focused exchange, a microcosm of the wider struggle. In a devastating blow, Esreng's weapon flashed, and he severed Nuada's arm from his body. The king survived, but his rule could not, for Tuatha Dé law was clear: no king could rule who was not physically whole. This single moment, the loss of an arm on that misty field, changed the course of Irish myth forever. Nuada was forced to step down, creating a vacuum of power that would shape the destiny of his people and lead to the rise of a new, even more formidable king. The battle itself ended in a tense stalemate, with the Tuatha Dé Danann winning the field but granting the Fir Bolg the province of Connacht. Yet the true consequence was this: a king was maimed, and a throne was left waiting, setting the stage for a second, far more terrible conflict to come. A king without an arm could not hold a throne, and so the Tuatha Dé Danann found themselves leaderless and vulnerable in their new home. This power vacuum invited a terror from across the sea, the Fomorians. These were not a noble people like the Fir-Bolg, but a race of monstrous, misshapen giants and pirates, a constant shadow of chaos threatening the order the Tuatha De Danann sought to build. Their rule was one of brutal oppression enforced through a crushing tribute. The Fomorian king, the terrifying Balor, demanded 2/3 of the Irish people's children, their grain, and their milk as a yearly tax, a levy that bled the land dry and kept its inhabitants in a state of perpetual fear. Balor himself was a figure of pure nightmare. He possessed a single, massive eye that remained sealed shut by heavy lids, for its gaze was a weapon of instant death. A mere glance from that eye could poison an entire army, leaving the fields littered with the dead. For years, the Tuatha De Danann suffered under this yoke, their magic and arts useless against such a direct and monstrous threat. Their salvation arrived in the form of a young man named Lug. He came to the court of the temporary king, and when the guard at the gate challenged him, Lug declared he was a master of every single art and skill. He was a warrior, a poet, a historian, a craftsman, and a magician all in one. They called him Lug Lamfada, Lug of the Long Arm, for his reach and influence would extend far indeed. Recognizing his unparalleled talents, the Tuatha De Danann made him their king, the one leader who could unite all their disparate skills against the Fomorian menace. Lug rallied his people, forging new weapons and preparing for a final, desperate war to break the cycle of tribute and fear. The two armies met on the same field as the first battle, Mag Tuaed, but this conflict held none of the former's ritual honor. It was a brutal, chaotic struggle for survival. The battle raged with ferocious intensity, but everyone knew the true fight was between Lug and Balor. The Fomorian king was carried onto the field, his massive eyelid pried open by servants to unleash its lethal power upon the Tuatha De Danann ranks. As that deadly eye began to sweep across the army, Lug acted with impossible speed and precision. He fitted a single stone into his sling and let it fly. The stone did not merely strike Balor's eye, it smashed through the orb itself, carrying it clean out the back of the giant's head. The poisonous gaze was wrenched backward, turning upon the packed ranks of the Fomorian army itself. In an instant, their own king's weapon decimated them, and the monstrous invaders broke and fled. Lug's victory was absolute. He freed his people from oppression and established a long and prosperous reign, proving that true leadership is not about a single power, but the masterful combination of all arts and skills. This battle cemented the Tuatha De Danann as the rightful rulers of Ireland, a legacy that would echo through the ages as they eventually faded into the hills and mounds, becoming the fairy folk of later legend. A relentless sun beat down upon the earth, scorching the land and driving humanity to the brink of despair. From this suffering rose a giant named Kuafu, a figure of immense strength and even greater determination, who declared a war not against a god or a monster, but against the heavens themselves. His mission was as simple as it was impossible. He would chase down the sun and capture it, putting an end to the devastating drought. With a mighty stride that covered leagues in a single step, Kuafu began his epic pursuit. Day after day, he raced across the vast plains and over towering mountains, his shadow stretching like a dark valley behind him as he closed the gap with the blazing celestial body. The heat was unimaginable, a physical force that baked the ground beneath his feet, but Kuafu's will was unbreakable. He ran with such incredible speed and endurance that he drew closer and closer, feeling the sun's intense warmth on his face, convinced that victory was within his grasp. But the very nature of his quest was his undoing. The monumental effort and the sun's relentless radiation consumed him, and a profound, unbearable thirst took hold. In a final, desperate act, he reached the Yellow River and drank. He did not sip, he consumed, drinking the entire great river until its bed was dry. Yet his thirst was not quenched. He raced onto the Wye River and drank that one dry as well. It was not enough. The battle was lost not to a rival's strength, but to his own mortal limits. Overcome by exhaustion and dehydration, the great giant Kuafu collapsed and died. But his story did not end there. His body transformed into a vast mountain range, and the wooden staff he carried sprouted into a lush, sprawling forest of peach trees, offering shade and sustenance to future travelers. This was not a tale of victory, but one of sublime sacrifice, a legend born from humanity's eternal struggle against the indifferent forces of nature. The serene balance of enlightenment can be shattered by a single act of pride. In the vast mythology of China, where giants once raced the sun, another legendary conflict unfolded not on land but across the churning waves of the Eastern Sea. This was the war of the 8 immortals against the Dragon King, a confrontation that pitted the pinnacle of Taoist spiritual achievement against the raw, untamed power of the elemental world. The 8 immortals were not gods born to power, but mortals who had achieved immortality through profound wisdom, discipline, and spiritual cultivation. Each was a unique personality, defined by a signature magical tool that embodied their essence. There was the wise old Zhongli Quan with his fan that could revive the dead, the cheerful Cad Goddeu with his castanets that could purify the surroundings, and the enigmatic Lu Dongbin, a scholar warrior who carried a demon-slaying sword on his back. The conflict ignited during a celestial celebration. After drinking the sacred nectar of the Queen Mother of the West, the immortals decided to cross the Eastern Sea to visit a sacred island. As they prepared to display their powers, Lu Dongbin suggested they cross without using their divine abilities, riding their magical items instead. It was a test of skill and a display of their hard-won enlightenment. But when the Dragon King of the Eastern Sea saw Lu Dongbin walking upon the waves, he took it as a grave insult, a violation of his sovereign domain. In a fit of rage, the Dragon King sent his grandson to steal Lu Dongbin's magic sword, an act that escalated a simple journey into an all-out war. The immortals would not let such an affront stand. Their response was a breathtaking symphony of coordinated magic, a true Taoist naval battle. The gentle He Xianggu, the only woman among them, cast her lotus flower upon the water. The petals did not float, they multiplied and solidified, forming a radiant, stable bridge of light that stretched toward the dragon's palace. As the Dragon King summoned his legions of marine soldiers, shrimp generals, and crab commanders, the other immortals unleashed their tools. The youthful Lan Ke played their flute, and the melody did not create music, but a howling tempest that churned the ocean into a frenzy, scattering the aquatic armies. Han Xiangzi blew upon his jade flute and summoned a bitter frost that froze entire sections of the sea, trapping entire battalions in ice. The ferocious roar of the ocean was met with the calm, focused power of enlightenment. The Dragon King, in his fury, called upon the very sea itself to drown the intruders, but the immortals stood firm upon their lotus bridge, their collective magic creating a dome of tranquil energy against the crashing tsunamis. They were not fighting with brute force, but with the refined power of their cultivated spirits, their tools acting as conduits for cosmic principles. In the end, the dragon's raw elemental might was no match for their harmonious and diverse magic. Defeated and humbled, the Dragon King was forced to return the stolen sword and apologize, his kingdom having been utterly overwhelmed by a power he could not comprehend. This was not a war of conquest, but a lesson in cosmic respect, proving that the highest power flows not from ruling a domain, but from mastering the self. Heaven itself became a battlefield in a war born not from territory, but from pride. Centuries after the ancient epics, the poet John Milton gave this celestial conflict its most definitive form in his literary masterpiece, Paradise Lost. He transports us to a time before the fall of man, to the pristine, luminous fields of heaven, a realm of perfect harmony and divine light. Here, the most beautiful and powerful of all angels, Lucifer, foments a rebellion. He cannot accept the command that all angels must bow to the newly proclaimed Son of God. To him, this decree is an insult, a demand for servitude from a being he considers his equal. His charisma is a weapon, and with honeyed words of liberty and self-determination, he persuades a full third of the heavenly host to join his cause. They raise a grand standard, a symbol of defiance against the very throne of creation. Facing them stand the loyal archangels Michael and Gabriel, commanders of the armies of God. The first day of battle commences, and it is a spectacle of terrifying beauty. Celestial warriors clad in diamond armor clash with fiery swords, their combat so immense that the very fabric of heaven groans under the strain. Michael and Lucifer meet in single combat, a duel of titans that ends with the rebel angel wounded, his pride shattered along with his celestial armor. But the war is far from over. Humiliated, the fallen angels retreat to plot a new form of warfare, one that would corrupt the very nature of this divine conflict. In a dark parody of divine creation, they delve into the raw materials of heaven and discover the secret of gunpowder. They forge cannons and shot, an unthinkable anachronism in this realm of pure spirit and blade. On the second day, as the loyal angels advance in glorious, ordered ranks, they are met not with a charge but with a deafening, smoky barrage. The rebels unleash their infernal engines, firing a storm of metal that tears through the heavenly host, forcing them to retreat in disarray and confusion. The pristine air of heaven is now choked with sulphurous smoke, a perfect metaphor for the corruption pride introduces into a perfect system. Milton frames this not as a war of strength, but as the ultimate philosophical struggle, pitting the destructive, chaotic force of pride against the harmonious, creative power of obedience. This literary battle would echo through the ages, asking a profound question about the nature of freedom and the high cost of defiance. The pristine fields of heaven were replaced by the misty, rain-swept hills of a Britain abandoned. With the legions of Rome gone, a darkness fell across the land, a chaos of warring kingdoms and ruthless invaders from across the sea. From this shadowy age, a single name echoes through the centuries, a war leader who became a legend, King Arthur. He was far more than a king in a golden crown. He was the last bastion of civilization, a commander rallying the battered Britons against the relentless tide of Saxon conquest. His story is woven from fragile threads of history and grand tapestries of myth, and at its heart lies his greatest triumph, the Battle of Mount Badon. Ancient chronicles tell us Arthur fought 12 great battles against the invaders, a long and bloody campaign that culminated on the slopes of this mysterious hill. It was here that he is said to have carried the cross of Christ upon his shoulders for 3 days and 3 nights, a powerful symbol that transformed him from a general into a holy warrior, a champion for his people and their faith. The battle itself is lost to precise history, but the legend remains vivid. We can almost hear the thunder of hooves as Arthur, perhaps leading a band of heavy cavalry, the seeds of his legendary Knights of the Round Table, launched a devastating charge down the slopes. The Saxon shield wall, a seemingly unbreakable line of seasoned warriors, would have buckled under the force of that assault. The fight was not just for territory, but for the soul of Britain itself, a last desperate stand to preserve a fading Roman way of life against the pagan onslaught. For decades after Badon, the Saxon advance was halted, and a fragile peace settled over the land. This victory cemented Arthur's legend not as a fairy tale monarch, but as the once and future king, a symbol of hope that one day, in a nation's darkest hour, a true leader would return to restore order. The mystery of the real man only deepens the power of the myth, leaving us to wonder if the greatest battles are those that forge not just kingdoms, but the very identity of a people. Yet the peace won at Mount Badon proved as fragile as glass. Arthur's golden age, secured by the Round Table and its noble ideals, began to crack from within, shattered by human frailty. The final blow was not struck by a Saxon army, but by a web of betrayal that entangled the king's own family. His queen, Guinevere, and his greatest knight, Lancelot, had fallen in love, their affair unraveling the bonds of loyalty that held the court together. This private sin was seized upon by Arthur's own nephew, or in some versions his illegitimate son, the envious Mordred. While Arthur was away dealing with the fallout of the scandal, Mordred declared himself king, usurping the throne and forcing a civil war that pitted knight against knight, brother against brother. The stage for this tragedy was the field of Camlann, a place often described as perpetually shrouded in a cold, grey mist, as if the land itself was mourning what was to come. The two armies, once united under one banner, clashed in a desperate, chaotic melee. In the heart of the fray, Arthur and Mordred finally found each other. The king, wounded and weary, faced the traitor who had destroyed his life's work. Their duel was short, brutal, and devoid of any glory. Arthur drove his spear, the legendary Rhongomyniad, clean through his son's body. But as Mordred fell, he used his last breath to lunge forward, striking a mortal blow to his father's skull. They fell together, the king and the usurper, their lives extinguishing one another on that cursed ground. With his final strength, Arthur commanded his last loyal knight to cast his sword, Excalibur, back into the lake from whence it came. A mysterious hand rose from the water to catch the hilt and draw it beneath the surface, a sign that the age of magic and heroes was over. The king himself was then borne away on a funeral barge by mystical queens, traveling to the Isle of Avalon to be healed of his grievous wounds, to sleep until his people have the greatest need of him. The Battle of Camlann is more than an ending. It is a haunting reflection on how the greatest empires can be toppled not by external enemies, but by the very secrets and betrayals festering at their heart. Even the most enlightened path can lead to a battlefield. From the haunting mists of Camlann, we journey to a realm where conflict itself is redefined, where the ultimate victory is not won by the sword, but by a single, perfect melody. This is the story of the Kalavi letter 1 E4, 5 Ka, a divine bird from the Buddhist Jataka tales, whose war against a kingdom of serpents presents a radical vision of conquest. The Kalavi letter 1 E4, 5 Ka was no ordinary creature. Born in the pure lands of the Buddha, it possessed a body of sublime beauty and a voice that could harmonize the very winds, a sound so pure it could quell the turmoil in any heart. Its opponents were the Nagas, powerful serpents of ancient lore who had turned a human kingdom into a land of terror. They were not mindless beasts, but intelligent, magical beings corrupted by their own venomous instincts, poisoning rivers and striking fear into the populace with their chaotic violence. A conventional hero might have gathered an army or forged a magical weapon, but the Kalavi letter 1 E4 5 Kas strategy was one of profound non-violence. It did not dive from the sky with claws bared, but instead perched high in a tree overlooking the serpent's domain and began to sing. Its song was the sound of compassion itself, a resonant wave of tranquility that washed over the Nagas, seeping into their agitated minds. One by one, the serpents stilled, their aggressive postures softening as they were lulled into a deep, peaceful trance. Their violent intentions melted away, replaced by a state of open, receptive calm. With his enemies disarmed not by force, but by their own newfound serenity, the Kalavi letter 1 E4 5 Ka began to teach. He spoke to them of the dharma, the universal law of truth. He explained the nature of suffering, how their own actions of fear and aggression bound them to a cycle of pain, and how letting go of that hatred could lead to their own liberation. He did not demand their submission, he offered them a better way. The Nagas, their hearts and minds unlocked by the divine music, listened and understood. This was the moment of true victory, a transformation more complete than any military surrender. The serpents, once the source of terror, renounced their violent ways and took vows to become protectors of the Dharma and the very people they had once tormented. Their great power was redirected from causing harm to guarding against it. In this extraordinary legend, the Kalvi-1E4-5 song was the only weapon, and enlightenment was the final decisive blow. It challenges our very definition of strength, suggesting that the most powerful force in any universe is not the ability to destroy an enemy, but the wisdom to dissolve the reason for the conflict altogether. Even the gods themselves were not immune to the futile waste of war. In the cold halls of the Norse cosmos, long before the doom of Ragnarök was written, a different kind of divine conflict unfolded, one that pitted tribe against tribe. This was the Aesir-Vanir War, a struggle not for survival, but for supremacy between two very different families of gods. On one side stood the Aesir, the gods of power, law, and warfare, led by the wise but cunning Odin and his mighty son Thor. Their home was Asgard, a fortress of order and hierarchy. Their rivals were the Vanir, an older race of deities who commanded the primal forces of the earth, the sea, and fertility. They were gods of abundance, represented by the bountiful Freyja, her brother Freya, and their father Njord, master of winds and coasts. For a time, these two pantheons existed separately, one ruling from its high fortress, the other from the fruitful world. But peace was shattered by an act of profound greed and violence. A Vanir goddess, a being of immense magic named Gullveig, whose name means gold thirst, traveled to Asgard. She was a seeress, and she brought with her a corrupting obsession with gold and the dark arts of Seda magic. The Aesir, viewing her powers as a threat to their masculine warrior code, reacted with horrific brutality. They seized her, stabbed her with spears, and tried to burn her alive in Odin's great hall. Yet 3 times they cast her into the flames, and 3 times she was reborn from the ashes, her power undiminished. This failed execution was the spark. The Vanir, rightly enraged by the torture of one of their own, declared war. The ensuing conflict was savage, a clash of fundamentally different worldviews. The Aesir hurled their martial might against the Vanir's deep, earth-born magic, but a strange truth soon became apparent to both sides. For all their spears and sorcery, neither tribe could gain a decisive upper hand. They were locked in a bloody, exhausting stalemate, a divine war of attrition that promised only endless, pointless death. They had reached a point where continued fighting was a greater folly than surrender. So, in a moment of divine wisdom, they did something remarkable. They chose peace. The two tribes met to negotiate, and their resolution was as creative as their war was destructive. The treaty was sealed with a powerful act of unity. They all spat into a great vat. From that mingled spittle of gods, they created a new being, Kvasir, who would become the wisest creature to ever live. His very essence was born from their collective truce. To further cement their bond, they exchanged high-ranking hostages. The Vanir sent their best, the wise Njord and his radiant children Freya and Freyja, to live among the Aesir. In return, the Aesir sent Honir, a god known for his imposing presence, and the wise Mimir. This exchange was not without its troubles, as the Aesir eventually beheaded Mimir, but Odin preserved his head to retain its counsel. Despite this grim postscript the union held, the Vanir deities were fully integrated into the Aesir pantheon, with Freyja even teaching Odin the very Seda magic his people had once despised. This war did not end with a victor and a vanquished, but with a merger. It was a divine lesson in the necessity of combining strength with fertility, law with magic, and power with wisdom to create a complete and functional world. The Norse pantheon as we know it, a pantheon of both Thor and Freya, was forged not in total victory but in a hard-won and pragmatic peace. Heavenly bureaucracy was no match for a monkey's pride. In the timeless Chinese epic Journey to the West, we meet a hero unlike any other, the stone-born monkey king, Sun Wukong. His very origin defied nature, erupting from a mystical rock that had soaked up the essence of heaven and earth for ages. He was not created, he simply was, a being of raw, untamed power from his first breath. He mastered the deepest secrets of magic, learned the martial arts of the immortals, and claimed a divine weapon, the massive, weight-shifting staff known as Rui Jingu Bang from the Dragon Kings of the Ocean. With his power undeniable, heaven itself took notice, but their solution was not to fight him, but to co-opt him. They offered him a title, the Keeper of the Heavenly Horses, a position that sounded grand but was in reality a glorified stable hand. This was the spark that lit the fuse. Sun Wukong was a king, and to be given such a menial role was the deepest possible insult. His rebellion was not born of a desire to rule the cosmos, but from a fierce, unyielding demand for the respect he felt he was owed. He declared himself the great sage, equal of heaven, and turned the celestial realm into his personal battlefield. The armies of the Jade Emperor descended upon him, legions of celestial soldiers and powerful generals. But the Monkey King was a whirlwind of chaos, a single combatant who could not be stopped. He defeated them all with a laugh, his magical staff whirling, his clones multiplying from plucked hairs to create an entire army of himself. He was not just fighting soldiers, he was mocking the very idea of a structured, ordered heaven. The conflict reached its peak when heaven sent its ultimate enforcer, the celestial general Erlang Shen, a warrior nearly his equal. Their duel became a legendary contest of transformations, a dizzying display of shape-shifting cunning. They became tigers and eagles, giant monsters and tiny insects, each trying to outwit the other. It was a battle of wits as much as strength, a cosmic game of cat and mouse that ravaged the heavens. Yet even this was not enough to subdue the defiant monkey. In a final, desperate attempt, the gods captured him and threw him into the 8 trigrams furnace of the supreme deity Laozi. They believed the primal fire would burn him to ashes. But after 49 days, Sun Wukong not only emerged alive, he was transformed. The intense heat had purified his eyes, granting him the ability to see through all falsehood and illusion, his fiery golden gaze becoming a permanent symbol of his ordeal. He kicked over the furnace, scattering the embers that would become the fiery mountains of the mortal world, and stormed back into the heavenly palace, his rebellion more potent than ever. This was not a war for a throne or a cosmic principle. It was the ultimate underdog story, the hilarious and thrilling chaos that erupts when an unstoppable force of individuality crashes against the immovable object of divine authority. While the heroes of Troy clashed for glory and survival, a parallel war erupted in the skies above them. The gods themselves abandoned their celestial posts to settle their own scores directly on the battlefield. This was the Titanomachy, a divine free-for-all that turned the Trojan War into a cosmic playground. The Olympians had long been manipulating events from afar, but their frustration with the stalemate and their own fierce partisanship finally boiled over. They descended to the dusty plains, their divine forms shimmering with power, and chose their own opponents in a series of explosive duels. The wise and warlike Athena, champion of the Greeks, sought out her bitter rival Ares, the god of raw, mindless conflict. While Ares roared and charged with brute force, Athena met him with disciplined strategy and cool precision, effortlessly deflecting his frenzied attacks and even striking him down with a well-aimed boulder, proving that brains truly do overpower blind bravado. Elsewhere on the field, the earth shook as Poseidon, supporting the Greeks, challenged his nephew Apollo, who defended the Trojans. The god of the seas and the god of the sun and music did not exchange blows with swords, but with the very elements they commanded. The ground split under Poseidon's footfall while Apollo stood firm, his silver bow unused, a tense standoff of raw divine power that threatened to tear the landscape itself apart. In another corner of the chaos, the queen of the gods, Hera, confronted the young huntress Artemis. The majestic, powerful wife of Zeus had no patience for her stepdaughter's archery. With shocking contempt, Hera simply snatched Artemis's bow from her hands, boxed her ears with it, and sent the youthful goddess fleeing from the battlefield in tears. The contrast between these divine scuffles and the mortal agony below could not have been more stark. As fathers and sons died in the dust, the gods bickered and brawled, their immortal forms immune to lasting harm. Ares could be wounded, but he would simply rise and retreat to Olympus to complain to Zeus. Their passions were real, their anger fierce, but the consequences for them were trivial. For the human soldiers, however, every divine clash amplified their own suffering. A thrown boulder from a god could obliterate an entire platoon, and a misplaced shockwave could shatter a hero's resolve. The Titanomachy reveals the gods not as detached arbiters of fate, but as deeply flawed, passionate, and often petulant beings, using the human world as their personal arena and magnifying the tragedy of Troy with their own immortal squabbles. Even the forest itself could march to war. From the chaotic squabbles of the Greek gods, we venture into the misty, enchanted heart of Celtic Wales, where one of mythology's most peculiar battles unfolded, not with steel but with bark and branch. This is the Battle of the Trees, or Cad Goddeu, a conflict so strange it is preserved in the ancient book of Taliesin, a poem of cryptic verses that challenge modern understanding. The wizard Gwydion, a master of magic and poetry, found himself in a dire struggle against Arawn, the formidable king of the Celtic otherworld, Annwn. Outmatched by conventional means, Gwydion turned to the most ancient allies he could find, the very forest around him. With an incantation of immense power, he did not merely call upon the trees, he awakened them. He gave them motion, purpose, and a place in his ranks, transforming a peaceful woodland into a surging, magical army. The imagery is surreal and specific. The older trees, sturdy and resistant to water, were placed at the forefront of the charge, their dark wood forming the first line of defense. The mighty oak, a symbol of endurance, formed the central command, its towering presence a bastion of strength. Yet not all flora was so eager for the fight. The willow, known for its pliability, and the quick-growing rowan, renowned for its protective magic, both held back, refusing to join the fray until the battle was nearly lost. Their hesitation was a strange drama within the greater war, a testament to the unique personalities Gwydion had bestowed upon his botanical soldiers. But the true secret to his command lay not in brute force but in the power of language. The legend speaks of a singular, potent word that Gwydion uttered, a word of ultimate knowing. With this sound, he was able to discern the true, secret name of every single tree and plant on the field. In Celtic belief, to know something's true name was to hold absolute power over its essence. By speaking their names, he did not just command them, he bound them to his will on a fundamental level. This was a battle won by poetry and knowledge, where a whispered syllable could turn a bramble into a shield and a root into a spear. The Battle of the Trees stands as a profound metaphor for the hidden power in nature and the magic inherent in language itself. A reminder that the greatest armies are not always made of men, but can be summoned from the world around us with the right key. A starkly different prophecy of the final battle was meticulously inked onto fragile parchment, hidden away in desert caves for 2,000 years. The war scroll, discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls, outlines an ultimate confrontation not from mythic antiquity, but from a prophesied future. Its authors, a devout Jewish sect known as the Essenes, saw themselves as the sons of light, destined for a cataclysmic war against the sons of darkness. This was not a symbolic struggle, but a real, eschatological conflict they believed was foretold and imminent, a final purification of the world. Their enemies were clearly named the Kittim, a term likely referring to the oppressive Roman Empire, alongside other regional adversaries who represented the pinnacle of worldly corruption. The scroll presents a stunning fusion of military precision and divine mandate, a holy war orchestrated by heaven itself. The battle plans are astonishingly detailed, describing a conflict that would span a symbolic 40 years, with decades of intense warfare punctuated by years of respite. The Sons of Light would march into battle behind specific linen banners, each inscribed with sacred names and phrases like the truth of God or the glory of God. The sound of specific trumpets would dictate every movement, from the call to assemble to the advance to the final victorious pursuit. Every element of the campaign was preordained, turning the army into a liturgical instrument, its movements a form of worship. The ultimate assurance of victory, however, lay not in their military discipline, but in direct celestial intervention. The scroll proclaims that the mighty Archangel Michael himself would descend to lead the heavenly host alongside the righteous. This divine reinforcement would ensure that the forces of darkness were not just defeated, but utterly annihilated, paving the way for a new, eternal age of truth and purity. This remarkable legend offers a rare and intimate window into the militant messianic hopes of a community waiting in the desert, convinced that they were the chosen instruments of God's final, decisive war. Even the divine choosers of the slain were not immune to the conflicts of the heart. High in the halls of Asgard, Odin's shield maidens, the Valkyries, were meant to be impartial specters of war, descending on winged steeds to decide which warriors would earn a place in Valhalla. Yet the poetry of the Norse sagas reveals they were often swept into the very human dramas they presided over. The legend of the Valkyrie Sigrun is a poignant tale of love and defiance that turned the celestial order on its head. Sigrun was no mere observer, she was a daughter, a woman bound by promises she could not abide. Her father had pledged her in marriage to Hrothbrod, a warrior she despised. But when she saw the hero Helgi, a champion of immense courage and nobility, her purpose shifted from observing fate to defying it. She appeared to him not as a harbinger of death, but as an ally, warning him of the impending conflict and pledging her support against her own family and her intended groom. This was an act of profound rebellion, a Valkyrie breaking her sacred neutrality for a mortal cause. The ensuing battle was therefore layered with a personal stake that resonated from the mortal plane to the divine. Helgi, fueled by this unexpected patronage, gathered his forces to confront Hrothbrod's superior army. As the shield walls clashed and the air rang with the song of steel, the skies themselves seemed to take a side. While the sagas speak in their cryptic, poetic language, it is strongly suggested that Sigrun, and perhaps other Valkyries sympathetic to her cause, did not merely watch. They likely soared above the fray, their presence a psychological weapon, their favor subtly tipping the scales of battle. Helgi's warriors, heartened by this divine endorsement, fought with the fury of men chosen for glory. The conflict ended in a decisive victory for Helgi, with Hrothbrod falling in the combat. This was more than a hero's triumph. It was the validation of a personal choice made in the face of divine and familial law. Sigrun's story shatters the image of the Valkyrie as an emotionless instrument of Odin's will. It reveals them as complex beings capable of passion, compassion, and a rebellious love that could alter the very outcomes they were sent to record. Their internal conflicts prove that no one, not even a chooser of the slain, can remain truly neutral when the heart commands them to war. The celestial war between the Devis and Asuras is a conflict without end. This is not one legendary battle, but a perpetual, cyclical struggle woven into the very fabric of Hindu cosmology, a divine tug of war over the control of the three worlds. On one side stand the Devis, the shining gods of order, knowledge, and celestial law. Opposing them are the Asuras, powerful beings often called demons or anti-gods, who embody chaos, materialism, and raw power. Their conflict is the engine of the cosmos, a necessary dynamic that maintains a delicate balance between light and shadow. The ultimate prize in this endless war is Amrita, the nectar of immortality. Whichever side holds it gains an unassailable advantage, and so this single goal has defined eons of divine warfare. But in one extraordinary moment, the eternal enemies were forced into a temporary, uneasy alliance. The gods and demons realized that the Amrita lay hidden deep within the cosmic ocean of milk, and it was too well guarded for either side to retrieve alone. They agreed to a truce and undertook the monumental task of churning the ocean itself. using the massive serpent King Vasuki as a rope and the cosmic mountain Mandara as a churning rod. The Devis pulled on one end of the serpent and the Asuras pulled on the other. For centuries they churned, and from the turbulent waters emerged incredible treasures and terrible poisons, until finally, the physician of the gods emerged holding the pot of Amrita. The truce shattered in an instant. The Devis, led by the preserver god Vishnu, had no intention of sharing the prize. Vishnu transformed into the enchantress Mohini, a woman of breathtaking beauty, who distracted the Asuras with her form and persuaded them to let her distribute the nectar fairly. She lined up the Devis on one side and the Asuras on the other, but as she moved down the line, she served the Amrita only to the gods. One Asura named Rahu saw through the trick. He disguised himself as a diva and managed to take a sip, but before he could swallow, the sun and moon gods alerted Vishnu, who instantly decapitated him with his divine discus. Rahu's head, having tasted the nectar, became immortal, and to this day he chases the sun and moon across the sky in an eternal revenge, causing eclipses. This legendary deception secured the Devis dominance for a time, but it could never end the war itself. The Asuras would always regroup, their power would always grow again, and the cosmic struggle would resume. This eternal conflict is a profound metaphor for the universe itself, a place where order and chaos, knowledge and ignorance are locked in a dance that has no final victor, only the perpetual motion of existence. The warrior women known as the Amazons were a legend in their own right, a society of unparalleled fighters who answered to no king. It was their fearsome reputation that drew Hercules to their shores for his ninth labor, a task that seemed straightforward. He was ordered to retrieve the magical girdle of their queen, Hippolyta, a belt that symbolized her power and authority. What should have been a simple negotiation, however, was doomed by divine interference. Queen Hippolyta, impressed by the hero's renown, was initially willing to give him the girdle as a gift, but the goddess Hera, who despised Hercules, descended among the Amazons disguised as one of their own. She whispered that the Greek hero and his crew had come to kidnap their queen. Trust shattered in an instant. The peaceful meeting erupted into a violent melee as the warrior women, believing they were defending their ruler, launched a furious assault. Hercules and his men, fighting for their lives, were forced to cut their way through the Amazon ranks. The labor was completed, but at a terrible cost. The girdle was seized in bloodshed, leaving a legacy of bitterness and betrayal. That bitterness would soon boil over into a full-scale war. The hero Theseus, who had accompanied Hercules, was so captivated by an Amazon named Antiope that he later returned and abducted her, some say with her secret consent. This act was the final insult. The entire Amazon nation mobilized for vengeance, marching across the known world to lay siege to Athens itself. The battle that followed was unprecedented, a stunning invasion that brought the war to the city's sacred Acropolis. The streets of Athens became a brutal killing ground where the disciplined phalanxes of Greek men clashed with the agile, horseback-riding women. It was a conflict that defied all contemporary notions of war, proving the Amazons were not just a myth from a distant land, but a formidable military power capable of challenging the greatest city in Greece. Their assault was so impactful that it became a foundational story for the Athenians, a tale of their city surviving its most dire and unexpected threat. Long before the Tuatha Dé Danann descended in their misty ships, a darker shadow lay over the green hills of Ireland. The Fomorians were a grotesque and terrifying race, their forms a chaotic mockery of nature, with limbs of mismatched size, single arms, single legs, and the heads of monstrous beasts. They were not merely invaders, they were the embodiment of wild, untamed chaos, a force of perpetual storm that fed on the suffering of others. Their rule was absolute, and their tyranny fell upon the Nemedians, the people who inhabited the land before them. The price for survival was a tribute of unimaginable cruelty, a debt that bled the land of its future. Every year at Samhain, when the veil between worlds was thinnest, the Fomorians arrived to collect their due. They demanded 2/3 of all the Nemedians' children, 2/3 of their harvested grain, and 2/3 of their precious milk. Can you envision the sheer horror of such attacks, the annual selection of the young, the emptying of storehouses that was meant to sustain a people through the winter, the theft of nourishment itself? This was not just oppression, it was a systematic culling designed to break the spirit of the land and its people, ensuring they remained too weak and terrified to ever rebel. The Nemedians were driven to the brink of extinction, their society hollowed out by this relentless, monstrous tribute. It was this legacy of terror, this memory of a world enslaved by chaos, that made the later arrival of the Tuatha Dé Dan, and not just a change of rulers but a desperate hope for liberation. The stage was set for a war that would be remembered not for its ritual, but for its necessity, a final confrontation to decide if Ireland would forever be a land of fear or finally become a land of song. The warrior code of the Red Branch Knights demanded absolute loyalty, yet it could not shield them from a betrayal born of greed. In the great hall of Emain Macha, the warriors of Ulster were bound by sacred oaths, but their king's most prized possession was a magical brown bull. When Queen Medb of Connacht, driven by envy and ambition, determined to steal this bull for her own, she raised a massive army from across Ireland to march on Ulster. She had chosen her moment with cunning precision, for a strange curse had fallen upon the men of Ulster, leaving them stricken with the pains of childbirth in their hour of greatest need. Only one defender stood between the invading army and the undefended province, a 17-year-old boy named Cuchulainn. He was not merely a warrior, he was a force of nature, the ultimate champion of the Red Branch. To halt the advance of thousands, he chose a single strategic point, a narrow ford in a river where the enemy must cross. There, he invoked the ancient rite of single combat, challenging the champions of Connacht to face him one by one. For days he stood firm, a lone sentinel against a tide of steel, his skill and speed so great that none could pass. But as the army grew impatient, his battles grew more ferocious, pushing him toward a terrifying transformation. When his rage peaked, his body would contort in a phenomenon known as the warp spasm. His body twisted violently, one eye sucking back into his skull while the other bulged out. His mouth stretched into a monstrous grin, and a halo of dark blood and fire erupted from his head. In this state, he was no longer a hero, but a whirlwind of destruction, an unrecognizable monster who moved faster than sight and slaughtered without mercy. Queen Medb, realizing she could not defeat this demon with ordinary soldiers, resorted to a cruel and personal stratagem. She sent forth Ferdiad, Cuchulainn's closest friend and foster brother, the man who had trained with him in arms and shared his childhood. The two warriors met at the ford, bound by deep affection yet torn apart by duty and honor. For 3 days they fought, their combat a heartbreaking display of skill and sorrow. They used the same martial arts, they knew each other's every move, and they traded gifts of food and healing herbs each night, lamenting the fate that forced them to duel. On the final day, pushed to his absolute limit, Cuchulainn was forced to unleash the Gibolg, a horrific barbed spear that spread 30 barbs through the body upon entry. He cast it upward from the stream, and it struck Ferdiad, piercing his armor and ending his life. Cuchulainn caught his dying friend, cradling him and weeping in anguish. The victory at the ford saved Ulster, but it was a hollow triumph, a testament to the terrible cost of heroism when the greatest battles are fought not against strangers, but against the bonds of one's own heart. Chaos reigned in the heavens long before celestial order was decreed. In the earliest days of Chinese myth, the cosmos was a fragmented realm where powerful god-kings and primal immortals fought for dominion, each ruling their own corner of existence without a central authority. The very fabric of reality was unstable, a realm in desperate need of a sovereign who could command not through brute force but through unimpeachable virtue. From this turmoil emerged a candidate no one expected, a mortal prince known for his profound kindness and unwavering devotion to his parents. This was the being who would become the Jade Emperor, and his path to the throne was the ultimate cosmic audition. His trials were not a single battle but a marathon of cultivation that lasted for eons, a test of his very essence. He immersed himself in deep meditation, facing down inner demons and worldly temptations, all while performing countless acts of selfless charity. His compassion was so boundless that he willingly sacrificed his own flesh to heal the sick and fed his own body to a starving eagle, each act radiating a spiritual light that the heavens could not ignore. The final challenge was a competition of cosmic scale. The other contenders for the throne were beings of immense power, including the stern and formidable Yanluo Wang, the future king of the underworld, who embodied justice but perhaps lacked mercy. The deities devised a series of profound tests, each designed to probe the depths of a candidate's character. They faced intellectual puzzles that questioned the nature of existence, spiritual trials that exposed every hidden flaw in their hearts, and martial contests that measured control and discipline rather than destructive power. In one pivotal test, the contenders were confronted with a raging inferno threatening to consume a village of mortals. While others used their power to shield themselves or divert the flames, the future Jade Emperor walked directly into the fire, not to fight it, but to save the souls trapped inside, prioritizing innocent life above his own safety and ambition. Through every challenge, his actions consistently demonstrated a perfect balance of wisdom, compassion, and righteous virtue. He did not defeat Yanluo Wang in a duel, he outshone him in integrity. His victory was a consensus, a celestial acknowledgement that he alone possessed the moral authority to unite heaven, earth, and the underworld under a single, harmonious rule. This legendary ascension established the foundational principle of the Chinese celestial bureaucracy, that true power is legitimized not by strength alone, but by earned virtue and selfless dedication to cosmic order. The swamps of Lerna were a place of perpetual dread, a mist-shrouded bog where the very air was thick with the stench of decay. Here lurked the Hydra, a monstrous serpent born from the foulest depths of the ancient world. Its body was that of a massive hound, but from its neck sprouted not one, but a writhing mass of venomous heads, their breath so toxic it could poison a man with a single whiff. This was the target of Hercules' second labor, a punishment that seemed designed to be his end. The challenge was not merely the Hydra's size or its poison, but its terrifying regeneration. Each time Hercules, with his immense strength and his mighty club, smashed or severed one of the snapping heads, the wound would instantly sprout two more in its place. The monster grew stronger and more numerous with every blow he landed, a nightmarish puzzle of ever-expanding violence. How do you defeat an enemy that multiplies with every attack? The hero's raw power was useless, even counterproductive. He was being overwhelmed, trapped in a cycle of his own making. Salvation came from an unexpected source, his young nephew Iolaus, who had followed him as a loyal charioteer. As Hercules wrestled with the regenerating horror, Iolaus saw the true nature of the problem. He rushed forward with a blazing torch, and together they devised a new strategy. The moment Hercules cleaved a head from the Hydra's body, Iolaus would press the fiery brand against the bleeding stump, searing the flesh shut with a sizzle of smoke and flame. This cauterization prevented new heads from growing, turning the tide of the impossible battle. Yet one head, a central and immortal one, was impervious to both blade and fire. Hercules had to adapt once more, finally burying that single, unkillable head beneath a massive rock, pinning the Hydra's essence for eternity. But the legend did not end with the monster's defeat. In a final act of brilliant cunning, Hercules dipped the tips of his arrows into the Hydra's own poisonous blood. The very essence that made the creature so feared was now his to command, a lethal asset he would carry forward into his remaining trials. This was more than a monster hunt. It was a lesson in adaptability, proving that even the greatest strength is useless without a clever mind and a loyal friend to light the way. The world we inhabit is a fragile gift born from divine suicide. In the highlands of ancient Mexico, the Aztecs understood creation not as a single event, but as a cycle of catastrophic wars between gods, a series of cosmic ages known as the Five Suns. Each of these worlds was a failed experiment, a universe that flourished only to be torn apart by jaguars, hurricanes, volcanic fire, and great floods, leaving only a void of primordial waters. Our own era, the Fifth Sun, is the latest and most precarious of all, and its existence hinges on a battle fought not with weapons, but with the ultimate self-sacrifice. The stage for this final creation was the sacred city of Teotihuacan, the place where the gods gathered in the darkness to decide who would bear the unbearable burden of becoming the new sun. Two proud gods stepped forward, the wealthy Tecusistecatl and the humble, diseased Nanahuatzin. A great divine bonfire was built, a pyre of immense spiritual heat. When the moment came for Tecusistecatl to leap into the flames, his courage failed him 4 times, retreating from the blistering terror. But Nanahuatzin, without a moment of hesitation, resolutely walked forward and threw himself into the inferno, consumed in an instant. Shamed by this act of ultimate humility, Tecusistecatl then followed, leaping in after him. The gods waited in the silence, and from the ashes 2 suns rose in the sky, Nanahuatzin as the brilliant sun and Tecusistecatl as the moon, their light equal and blinding. Yet this act of sacrifice was only the first half of the battle. The new sun and moon hung motionless in the sky, fixed in place, and a dormant cosmos is a dead one. For the world to live, the sun needed to move, to journey across the heavens and create the cycle of day and night. This required a second, even more terrible war. The wind god Ehecatl, a manifestation of the great feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl, took up the task. He did not fight the other gods with malice, but with a grim, necessary purpose. One by one, he slew the entire pantheon of deities who had gathered at Teotihuacan. With his powerful breath, he blew upon the sun, pushing it into motion with the force of the wind generated by this divine massacre. The blood of the slain gods became the vital energy, the Chalchihuatl, that fueled the sun on its first perilous journey across the sky, establishing the rhythm of time itself. This is perhaps the most profound mythical battle of all, a war where the victors were also the victims, and the very act of creation is sustained by the perpetual sacrifice of the divine. It presents a universe that demands payment for its existence, where life, light, and time are bought with the ultimate currency, the very essence of the gods. Even the earth itself could give birth to an army. The founding of the great city of Thebes began not with a king's decree, but with a field of nightmares. The hero Cadmus was searching for his abducted sister when he was instructed by the oracle to follow a specific cow and build a city where it lay down. The exhausted animal finally collapsed on a fertile plain, the future site of Thebes. But when Cadmus sent his men to fetch water from a nearby spring, a monstrous guardian emerged. This was no ordinary beast, but a sacred dragon, a child of the war god Ares, and it slaughtered every one of his companions. In a fury of grief and survival, Cadmus confronted the serpent and managed to slay it. Standing over the slain monster, he received a strange and terrifying instruction from the goddess Athena. He was to pull the dragon's teeth from its jaw and sow them into the rich soil like seeds. It was an act that defied all logic, planting the essence of a monster to reap an unknown harvest. What sprouted from the earth was a sight of pure terror. The soil churned and broke as armored men, fully grown and bristling with weapons, pushed their way into the light. These were the Spartoi, the sown men. They did not emerge as allies or a founding population, but as a host of instant murderous warriors. The field echoed with the clatter of bronze as they rose, their eyes filled with a blind, inherent rage, and without a single command, they turned on one another in a spontaneous, ferocious battle. The air filled with the screams of these earth-born brothers killing each other the moment they drew breath. Cadmus watched in horror, realizing he had unleashed a force he could not control. Following divine counsel, he seized a precious stone and hurled it into the seething center of the melee. The warriors, consumed by greed and suspicion, each believed another was trying to steal the valuable jewel for himself. The single object amplified their paranoia, and the internal slaughter intensified until the field fell silent. Only 5 of the sown men remained standing, exhausted but alive. These 5 survivors, shaken from the bloodshed, laid down their arms. They became the noble founding families of Thebes, their lineage literally sown from the dragon's teeth and tempered in a battle against themselves. This legend captures the brutal and paradoxical nature of civilization's birth, a city-state born not from peaceful settlement, but from a self-cannibalizing war that rose directly from the ground. The sky itself was a battlefield in the beliefs of the ancient Slavs. Their world was defined by a fundamental duality, a cosmic tension between the ordered heavens and the chaotic underworld, a conflict personified in the eternal struggle between 2 great gods. On one side stood Perun, the formidable lord of thunder, lightning, and stern law. His voice was the crack of the storm, his weapon a mighty axe that could cleave mountains. Opposing him was Veles, a shape-shifting god of the deep waters, forests, and the underworld, a master of magic and chaos who often took the form of a great serpent or dragon. This was not a single, decisive war, but a perpetual cycle of conflict that defined the rhythm of the cosmos itself. The pattern was always the same. From his watery domain, Veles would ascend, slithering up the world tree that connected all realms. His transgression was typically one of theft, stealing Perun's sacred cattle, his children, or even his wife, an act that symbolized chaos encroaching upon the established order. In response, the fury of Perun would be unleashed. The thunder god would mount his chariot and pursue the serpentine Veles across the vault of the heavens. The brilliant flashes of lightning were the strikes of Perun's axe, hurled at his fleeing adversary. The tremendous roar of the storm was the sound of their celestial chase, a divine drama playing out directly above the heads of mortals. The chase would inevitably drive Veles back down to earth, where he would hide in the deepest waters or beneath the roots of the great tree. Yet this was never a true victory. The conflict was cyclical, an essential dynamic for the world's balance. The storms brought by Perun's pursuit cleansed the land and fertilized the soil with life-giving rain, a gift born from divine rage. Veles, for all his chaotic nature, was not a purely evil force. His realm was also one of artistic inspiration, wealth, and the untamed potential of the wild. Their eternal battle was a way for the ancient Slavs to explain the very nature of existence, the necessary tension between the clear structure of the sky and the fertile, unpredictable chaos of the earth and waters, a struggle that ensured the world would never stagnate. Our journey ends not on a battlefield of earth, but in the vast, silent theater of the night sky. Look up at the stars, and you are looking at the final, eternal monument to mythical warfare, a celestial tapestry where the greatest battles were frozen in light for all time. This is the legend of the Great Celestial Hunt, a conflict written in the constellations. In one of the most enduring Greek tales, the story unfolds around Orion, a hunter of such prowess he boasted he could kill every beast on earth. The goddess Artemis, patron of the wild, watched his arrogant slaughter with growing anger, or in some versions, her brother Apollo grew fearful for her safety. To stop the hunter, a single, deadly scorpion was summoned from the earth. It stung Orion on the heel, delivering a fatal dose of venom. In grief, or perhaps to honor their eternal struggle, the gods placed both hunter and scorpion in the heavens, but positioned them on opposite sides of the sky. To this day, the constellation Orion sets just as Scorpius rises, forever chasing each other in an endless, cosmic dance of pursuit and avoidance. This was not an isolated story. Far older, the Babylonian Emuel, pin clay tablets mapped the stars not as pictures, but as divine armies and celestial creatures locked in their own seasonal campaigns. The stars were the soldiers of the gods, their movements a grand, strategic maneuver across the dark field of night. Across cultures, the sky became a storybook of conflict. The dragon Ladon coils around the pole star, forever guarding the golden apples of the Hesperides from Hercules. The great hero Perseus eternally holds aloft the head of Medusa. The centaur Chiron, the great teacher, is immortalized as Sagittarius, aiming his bow at the heart of the scorpion. Every culture that looked upward saw its own legends reflected in the patterns of light. The entire celestial sphere is a silent, glittering memorial. It is a reminder that the most epic struggles, whether born of pride, love, or the very need for cosmic order, were considered so fundamental to existence that they were etched into the fabric of the universe itself. These are not just pretty patterns, they are the ghosts of 30 extraordinary legends, a permanent record of the battles that shaped our world, our gods, and our understanding of the eternal conflict between darkness and light. From the celestial tapestry of the stars to the very dawn of time, we have traveled across 30 extraordinary legends of mythical warfare. We witnessed the cosmos forged in the fires of the Titanomachy, trembled before the twilight of the gods at Ragnarök, and stood beside heroes like Cuchulainn at the ford, their hearts torn between duty and friendship. We saw wars fought with wooden horses, with enchanted songs, and with seeds that sprouted armies from the earth. Though these battles span continents and cultures, echoing from ancient Greece to the halls of Valhalla and the plains of Kurukshetra, they are bound by powerful, universal threads. They all explore the primal struggle between order and chaos, the catastrophic price of hubris when mortals or gods defy their appointed place, and the profound, often tragic, cost of conflict. These stories were never mere entertainment for our ancestors. They were the fundamental frameworks used to explain a frightening and wondrous world, to codify societal values like honor and sacrifice, and to grapple with humanity's own role in the vast, mysterious cosmos. They ask the big questions: where did we come from, why is there suffering, and what does it mean to be a hero? The battles may be mythical, but the courage, the tragedy, and the lessons they teach are as real as ever. These 30 legendary conflicts leave us with a timeless question. Which of these epic battles captivated you the most? Was it the world-ending doom of Ragnarök, the tragic fall of Arthur at Camlann, or the chaotic, defiant rebellion of the Monkey King? The comments are waiting for your voice. Share your own favorite mythical battle from any culture around the world and tell us why its story resonates with you. If you enjoyed this epic journey through the annals of legendary warfare, please give the video a like. It truly helps us continue bringing these deep dives to you. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss our next exploration into the shadows where history and myth intertwine. Thank you so much for watching. We are incredibly grateful for your time and curiosity. Now the conversation continues with you. Join our growing community of history and legend enthusiasts right here.